What is the purpose of the 8th grade theology course at Malvern Preparatory School? This course is best described as Christianity from the adolescent perspective. If this course is going to be relevant, it needs to connect with the life and times of a 13 or 14-year-old young man. What do we know about adolescence? Especially at this age, 8th graders are going through an enormous amount of change. This is their last year of middle school. Next year will be their first year of high school. This transition involves physical, emotional, and spiritual change. Every topic covered, each theme investigated, and all the lessons of the course are aimed at assisting with this transition. It is important to make these young men aware of their personal responsibilities to themselves and to others. How is this accomplished? It is accomplished by making them more comfortable with their relationship with God. Whether it is a daily lesson or a major project, it is absolutely necessary and only makes the class meaningful if we can connect the teachings of Christianity to the life of an 8th grader. A good portion of the 8th grade theology course is dedicated to examining the great foundations of our Christian faith. On the left-hand side, we have some of these important ideas. And on the right-hand side, we have some of the people involved with these important developments of our foundations of Christianity. Obviously, we do not have time to elaborate on each of these, but as a means to provide a sample of what the 8th grade theology course investigates, we will choose two. For instance, the life of the early Christians. We'll talk about how the early Christians lived in communities and how they were a persecuted minority. And then we'll look at a man named Seneca, who was a Roman philosopher, and we'll investigate his experience of visiting the Roman Colosseum because it was the thing to do. And we will reflect upon his writings that when he came home from the Colosseum after witnessing the persecution, Seneca was more greedy, more cruel, and more inhumane because he had been around other humans. And then we'll ask the 8th graders, are there circumstances or events taking place today which may resemble the events that took place back at the Roman Colosseum? Television shows or video games or even something such as UFC fighting, which we have become desensitized to just because society accepts it. Then we will investigate later on in the year something called scholasticism as we investigate the transition from monasteries to cathedrals, and we will discuss the great Christian theologian and philosopher St. Thomas Aquinas. And even though these young men are only in 8th grade, we will ask the 8th grade students to look upon two of the proofs of God's existence offered by St. Thomas Aquinas. And we'll challenge these young men to develop their logical approach to their faith and even investigate some of the criticisms of these proofs of God's existence and tell them that at some point in the future their faith may be challenged and that it is okay that there are no airtight proofs of some of the mysteries of faith, and that at some point all faith is just that, a leap of faith.
My dear Wormwood, everything is clearly going well. I'm especially glad to hear that the two new friends have now made him acquainted with their whole crowd. All these, as I find from the record office, are thoroughly reliable people, steady, consistent scoffers and worldlings who, without any spectacular crimes, are progressing quietly and comfortably towards our Father's house. You speak of their being great laughers. I trust this does not mean that you are under the impression that laughter as such is always in our favor. The point is worth some attention. I divide the causes of human laughter into joy, fun, the joke proper, and flippancy.
How does the devil lure us humans into doing things we should not? There are two types of sin, sins of commission and sins of omission. C.S. Lewis investigates the theological concept of temptation in his wonderful book, The Screwtape Letters. This is one of the more challenging academic exercises for the 8th grade students. They typically complain a bit because it definitely pushes the limits of their academic abilities, which is always a good thing. And it is written from the perspective of the devil, which means they usually have a bit of a time getting the gist of how this book is actually presenting the ideas. And of course, it's British, so the language is a bit of a stretch for them. But in the end, they typically embrace this assignment, and it usually hits home with them and delivers a lot of meaningful ideas related to the theological principles of temptation. There will be an individual test on the first 10 letters, followed by presentations. The presentations take place with a partner, so each pair of students will be assigned a specific letter, and they will deliver the contents of the letter, an explanation of what happened during the letter, along with a thorough explanation of the theological lessons from that letter, and most importantly, how the letter applied to the lessons to the life of an 8th grader. On the previous slide, you listened to a segment from letter 11, and these letters really play well into the idea of temptation for adolescents. Themes such as choosing your friends and laughing at someone, and when laughing is actually laughing, and when actually laughing is making fun of someone and may be wrong. So it's a wonderful way to talk about temptation in a creative manner. Why do bad things happen to good people? Why does a loving God allow some people to suffer horrifically, physically or mentally or spiritually? Teaching for 23 years has afforded me the opportunity to get to know a lot of young men. It has also opened my eyes to the realization that even at this young age, 8th graders, some of them have really experienced suffering firsthand. Obviously, these are difficult questions, and there are no definitive answers to some of these theological questions. However, it is good to investigate the themes of the book of Job and to discuss why do bad things happen to good people, and why a loving God would allow people to suffer, and why some people seem to get off scot-free, why other people just have suffering throughout their entire lives. It seems like a pretty serious topic to end the year, but it's a good way for them to wrap up their theological studies of middle school.